Hey, and welcome to Bible 365 with Kathy Carter. Today is day 58, and we are reading Numbers 2 and 3. So if you've never been with me before, we are sort of in the third book in a series of books. We're really in the fourth because, well, we did 5 books already. This is the third book, though, since we've met Moses. And so if anyone is joining this for the very first time today, I really strongly encourage you to go start back at the book of Moses. It would be the book of Exodus. And you would read that book first and then come here because you're introduced to people like Moses and Aaron, which are really important people. And so to know a little bit more about them would be fantastic in moving on into this section. Otherwise, Numbers might be a little confusing. You might feel like you're missing some pieces before you get into it. But obviously, I always say best case scenario is you would always go back to day 1, which is Genesis 1. And I have videos every single day. So if you needed to do some catch up, take your time, go back, catch up with all those videos, and then move on with reading. And we are reading the 1-year chronological Bible reading plan. So it's 365 days of reading, 1 day for every day in the year. Although, and we're coming upon it, the 29th of February is leap year. And so we're going to have an extra day this year. And we don't have any reading on that day. So I'm going to do a little something else and we'll kind of see what that is. So today we're going to move on there. So we are in Numbers and we are with Moses and Aaron still. So my back to go forward is that Moses, through God's power, Moses and Aaron, but mostly Moses, led the Israelites out of Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt, led them through all of these miracles, led them out of Egypt into right now, they are currently at the base of Mount Sinai. And so they are going to start moving on from here. They created a home in which God will dwell in. So he will be there, a cloud during the day. He will be, and then at night, he will be fire. So they will always know that God is dwelling in that house. And they will, when that fire is, when it's going, they need to move, right? And so otherwise they need to settle and they need to stay when the fire is down. When it goes up, they need to move on. And so they created a home that was portable, that was and it's very large, not quite the size of a football field, maybe half of a football field. And it is a portable field. So they break everything down and they move on. And I'm telling you that because we're going to go into that a little bit. And so all these rules and all these guidelines came from God, and he takes them very, very seriously. So we have actually seen where Aaron's sons lost their lives because they did not follow God. They actually went on their own way, and they added fire in the tent when they were not supposed to. So, okay, Moses is the leader. He's the guy in charge. Aaron is the leader of the priests, which is made up of Aaron and his sons. 2 of them have died, but 2 of them are still there. And then it is the Levites. And so we're going to get a little bit more information in that. I don't want to go too far because we're going to get a little more information now. So we're starting out on this with chapter 2. And it starts as always, verse 1. The Lord says to Moses and Aaron, the Israelites are to camp around the tent of meeting some distance from it, each of them under their standards and holding the banners of their families. So if you remember yesterday, we left off yesterday where, so they had this tabernacle, right? So the house of God was here. And then so right around surrounding the house of God were the Levites. And we'll get a little bit more information about that. But right around them are the Levites. And then around that is where we're going to see the rest of the Israelites. And so they're going to camp, and it is expertly done because obviously it's God. It's extremely organized. And so we're going to see what that looks like. So all of them have their own banners and they all have their own standards. And so what we're going to see is the way everything is set up. It's 3 tribes sort of to a side. So the tabernacle is the center and everything is based around the tabernacle. And so it's 3 family groups to a side. And then they all have their own banners for their family. So let's say the house of Judah has its own banner. And then they have a standard for their side. So east side, north side, west side, south side. Wasn't sure about the 4th one. So they each have a banner. So they're all counted. And if you remember, they were all counted. And so we know their numbers. And then the east side, so just kind of going in this first section. So the east side, and they really declare this one first, and this one seems to have the most description. This is the one that actually faces the sun. So the sunrise is actually what it faces. And so in this one, we have the house of Judah, we have the house of Issachar, and we have the house of Zebulun. Remember that these are made up of the 12 sons of Israel, slash, his name really was originally Jacob. So Jacob was the son of Isaac. Isaac was the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of the Israelite, the Hebrew people. He was the one that God made the covenant with after Noah, and after that entire family grew. And so they're on one side, they are first. So anytime they decide to move, right? So when God is ready to move them, they're the first ones to pick up all their stuff and they're to walk forward. So we're going to see they're sort of walking in a line. And so the first side, the east side, is first. And then we have groups after that. And then the second side is the south side. And that is the brothers of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. And they're second in line as they start to travel. And it's 151,450 people. The other ones are the first set, the east side is 186,000 people. And then after that, we are south. After that, so east side, south side. Then they have the tent of meeting. So sort of smack in the middle of that is where all the Levites are, and Moses and Aaron, right? So then all of them get up, they lift up all their stuff, and then they move on. And they're not technically third; they're in between. They're actually not counted as a group. Then after that, we have the west side. So in verse 18 is the west side, which is Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, 108,000 people. And then the last group is the north side, which is Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. And it is 157,600 people. And they are the last ones to go. And just a reminder as well that Ephraim and Manasseh are Joseph's sons. So if you remember way back when we did the book of Genesis, which is so great, this is why we do it in chronological order. Now we understand that these two tribes were created because they were actually the sons of Joseph, and Jacob adopted these two sons as his own. And so Joseph doesn't have a people group. His two sons do. So his two sons each have their own clan, their own tribe of people. All right, so we're going to move on to Numbers 3. That was Numbers 2. It sort of did all the setup and what everything looks like. There's not a whole heck of a lot going on in this chapter, but it's a great foundation to understand what everything looked like when they were there, right? So the next one is Aaron and Moses and his family. So if I read verse 1 in Numbers 3, it says that this is the account of the family of Aaron and Moses at the time the Lord spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai. And so he's reminding them again that there was Moses and Aaron. They were brothers. And Aaron had 4 sons, but 2 sons came to the altar the wrong way. And so those 2 sons were taken by God. And so now he has 2 other sons. And those are the people that right now, those are the only people that are able to go into the altar at the tent of meeting. So anyone else would be put to death. So right now, those are the only ones. They are essentially the priests, right? So they're the priests that take care of meeting with God and finding all these things out and speaking through God, and then coming and telling the Israelite people. The other people that are there and catering to all the holy things are the Levites. So we kind of go in a little bit more detail. It says in verse 5, the Lord said to Moses, bring the tribe of Levi and present them to Aaron the priest to assist him. So a lot of this is recap, things that I've sort of hit on before, but it's always good to be reminded because we have a huge tendency to forget. So they're to perform duties for him, for Aaron and the sons, and for the whole community at the tent of meeting by doing the work of the tabernacle. So because they are doing the work of the tabernacle, they are providing for the entire Israelite community. And remember, it's to be in relationship with God. So they are providing the ability and the means for the Israelite people as a group, all of these other 12 tribes, to be in relationship with God. They are, I think I've called it before, the bridge, right? The connector between God and his people, the Israelites. All right. So if I going to read verse 8, going to just start discussing what their things are taken care of. So they're to take, in verse 8, it says they're to take care of the furnishings of the tent of meeting, fulfilling the obligations of the Israelites by doing the work of the tabernacle. Give the Levites to Aaron and his sons. They are the Israelites who are to be given wholly, completely, fully, not wholly set apart, but wholly and completely to him. So, moving on to verse 11. The Lord also said to Moses, I have taken the Levites from among you, the Israelites, in place of all the first male offspring of every Israelite woman. So if you remember, he said, the Levites are mine, for all the firstborn are mine. If you remember, he made a deal when he took them out of Egypt, and he said to the people, God made a deal with the people. He said to Moses to tell the people that because he saved them from slavery, that from here on out, all the firstborns would be dedicated to the Lord. And so then once they got out, it was sort of, for in place of a better word, it was a trade. So now the Levites are in place of every firstborn son that is living right now. So it's a trade for the firstborn sons that are living right now, which is what I found really interesting. So in verse 17, it says, these were the names of the sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And I want to be extremely clear. These sons are no longer alive. So these sons were born way back. So let's go 400 years back to Levi, who was the son of Jacob. So if we go back to the book of Genesis, if you'll remember, Joseph was one of the brothers who was living in Egypt because his brothers threw him out. They pretended he died and they sold him into slavery. And so he was living in Egypt, and he became the second in command in Egypt. And he did such an amazing job that when the land was in famine, his family came to go get grain. Then he told them who he was, and then he brought all of his family, all of Jacob's sons and their sons and their sons, and he brought them all into Egypt in Goshen to live in the land. This was where those three sons lived. This is where and when those three sons lived. Now, here we are talking 400 years later when God pulls them out of slavery. These guys are no longer alive. It's a reminder that it's their family that is taking the place of this, right? So it's not these three, although they are represented by these three. So when we say Levi, it's not literally the son of Levi because he has died many, many years past, but it's his whole tribe and it's all of his people group. So when it says here, these are the sons, the Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, they are no longer alive, but their people groups are still alive. And so each of them had a clan. The Gershonites had the Libni and Shimei clan. The Kohathites had Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uziel. And the Merarite clans had Mali and Mushi, right? So these were all the clans of the Israelite people. Each of them had their own job. So they were each numbered. Gershonites were 7,500. The Kohaths were 8,600. Merari were 6,200. And so in total, the Levites made 22,000 people, so significantly less than any of the other tribes. But they were 22,000 people, and so all of these people were the ones who were supposed to be taking care of the tabernacle and all things holy. All right, so I want to move on to what they did. So the Gershonites were in charge of, so every time, and I think I mentioned this already, but every time they moved, these Levites were the ones that were in charge of picking everything up, moving everything, and then placing it back down exactly where it was supposed to be. And so each tribe had their own place. And so the Gershonites were the ones who would take care of the tabernacle. So they would take care of like the coverings and the curtains, and right, so they had control over all of those things. So they would close them all up, shut everything down, and all the furnishings that had to go with it, and they would take them with them. And then the Kohathites were in charge of the sanctuary, where the altar was, where the tabernacle, not the tabernacle, which was the big place, where the lamp was, where the altar of incense was. So they were taking care of all that and all of those furnishings, and they would bring them with them. And then the Meraris were in charge of like frames and bases and rods, and so they picked everything up. And so each had their part, and they stayed that way, and they were that way for generations. And then we had Moses and Aaron, and Moses and Aaron were lived to the east, so they lived sort of in front of Judah. They lived to the east towards the sunrise. So remember that Judah, those tribes were the first tribes that sort of moved out, and then Moses was kind of parked. Moses, Aaron, and all of his sons were parked sort of in front of them. And so And so they had the spot towards the sunrise as well. And so remember that they were the only ones that were able to approach the sanctuary. So I want to move on to the next section. And it says in verse 40, the Lord said to Moses, count all the firstborn Israelite males who are a month old or more and make a list of their names. So, and there was a reason for this. So remember, God owned the firstborn, right? So he said to them, count them. And then he said, count the Levites, right? So we found out that the Levites had 22,000 people in it. Anyone that was a month old, right, or older, firstborn, was there were 22,273 of them. And so this is the perfection and the beauty of God. So the Levites took the place of 22,000 of them, which left 273 people left, right? So there were 273 unaccounted for firstborns that the Levites couldn't make up. And so they paid for them. So each person had value, and there was value in all of these people. All the firstborn sons had value, and so they all had to be paid for by the community in order to for God to allow the Levites to count as the firstborn sons for all of them. Every one of the firstborn sons needed to be accounted for. All right, so I want to move on to 51, which is right near the end here. And in 51, it says they had to pay 1,365 shekels according to the sanctuary. Moses gave the redemption money to Aaron and his sons as he was commanded by the word of the Lord. So this was a redemption price. They were paying for them, redeeming them as firstborn sons. And so Moses made that payment, and as he was commanded by the Lord. So that's where I'm finishing today. That is all we have. And tomorrow we are going to continue in the book of Numbers. And so we're going to get a little more information from the word. And if you like this, I want you to hit the like button, subscribe to it so you can get it every day. If you want, share it with other people. The more it shares, the better it grows. And then the easier it is to find, which is another thing. It's certainly difficult to find when it's first starting out. There's not that many there. So share it with others. And I want you to keep reading, work your way through Numbers. There's some really good stuff that starts to come in. There's some meat and some interesting stuff that's coming after we get through the actual Numbers portion of this book. And I'll see you next time.